The reservation arrived at 8:17 on a Monday morning, buried between a supplier dispute and a message from the county about snow removal. I would have missed it if Mara Ortiz had not been standing in the doorway with a tablet pressed against her chest. "You need to see this." I kept my eyes on the forecast projected across my office wall. Another storm was moving across the pass, not dangerous yet, but dense enough to turn the road into a slow argument between tires and ice. Northlight House was built for winter, but winter still had a vote in every decision we made. If this is about the florist charging us for an extra dozen branches, tell him we are not paying for greenery he never delivered. It is not the florist. Something in her voice made me turn. Mara had been my chief operating officer for 6 years. She could tell me that a boiler had failed, a celebrity guest had threatened to leave a 1-star review, or an investor had discovered an inconvenient decimal without changing the temperature of her voice. This morning, her composure had a seam in it. She crossed the room and set the tablet on my desk. The screen showed a booking confirmation. 6 premium suites, 5 nights. The Cedar Ballroom reserved for a private Christmas event. Mercer Real Estate listed as the billing company. For a few seconds, the words did not connect. They were only shapes arranged into a transaction. Another wealthy family selecting the Aspen property because it had the right view, the right privacy, and enough staff to make complicated people feel effortless. Then I saw the guest contact. Adrian Mercer. My father. I read the name twice. The second time, the room changed around it. The glass walls of my office still looked out over the white slope behind the main lodge. The fire in the stone hearth still made its patient clicking sounds. Downstairs, someone was testing the piano in the lobby, 3 notes repeated with increasing irritation. Everything continued as if a name from 12 years ago had not just walked through the front door. "It is a family reunion," Mara said. "He is calling it that?" The reservation notes say Mercer Christmas Gathering. The event team requested a private dining layout, a photographer, and a 5-night itinerary. She hesitated. "It is the first one in 12 years, according to the event coordinator." I leaned back in my chair. 12 years was long enough for a child to become an adult, for a business to move from debt to expansion, for a family story to harden into something everyone repeated because correcting it would require remembering. "Does he know?" Mara asked. I understood the question, without asking what she meant. "No." "You are sure?" "He booked Northlight House through Mercer Real Estate. The brand is public. My name is not." That was intentional. Northlight's public-facing executive was Mara, whose interviews were sharper, warmer, and far less likely to become a family investigation. Our holding company had a neutral name. I appeared in ownership documents, board records, and the occasional industry publication, but I did not put my face beside the property every time a journalist wanted a founder story. My family knew I had worked in hospitality once. They knew I had left home with a laptop and a temper. They did not know what those 2 things had become together. "He thinks he is renting from a corporate group," I said. "He thinks he is renting from a corporate group with excellent taste." Mara tapped the lower half of the screen. "There is something else." She brought up a second file. Gideon Shaw Development Group. The term sheet was non-binding, which meant it was not yet a threat the lawyers could attack. It was still a threat in the way a hand hovering above a table could be a threat before it struck. The proposed purchase was not for Northlight House Group itself. It was for a minority block in the Northlight Aspen SPV, the entity that held the flagship property. The block belonged to Julian Bell's investment vehicle. Julian had helped me buy the abandoned lodge when nobody else believed an exhausted 24-year-old could turn a collapsed roof and 3 unpaid invoices into a business. His fund had taken a minority position in the Aspen property in exchange for the early capital. He had never treated the stake as a favor. That was one reason I trusted him. Gideon wanted it. Adrian's name appeared in the advisor section. I scrolled further. Mercer Real Estate was listed as a conditional development partner. The proposal mentioned an access corridor, adjacent parcels, and a possible luxury residential conversion that would unlock underutilized valley value. Underutilized valley value. That was how men described a place where people lived, worked, and remembered the names of the staff who brought them soup during a storm. "Is there a formal offer?" I asked. "No, a term sheet only. Julian's people are still considering whether to entertain it." "Then my ROFR clock has not started." Priya confirmed that this morning. I looked back at the booking. My father's family reunion, Gideon's term sheet, the same week, the same property. "Did Gideon request a site review?" "Nothing formal." Mara's mouth tightened. "But Adrian's assistant asked for a private tour of the access road and the south parcel. I declined and offered the standard guest itinerary." So that was the shape of it. My father had not chosen Northlight because he knew it was mine. Gideon had asked him to look at the property without opening a formal due diligence file. The reunion was a respectable cover. 6 suites, a ballroom, a family photograph, and a man who could walk around my flagship while pretending to admire the mountain view. I should have felt only anger. Instead, something quieter settled into place. "Keep the booking," I said. Mara studied me. "That is your decision?" "Keep it exactly as booked. Premium service. No extra privileges." "And the ownership reveal?" I looked at the snow beginning to gather along the glass railing outside. "Not before they arrive." "Claire, the term sheet is not a definitive offer. Julian has not served anything. Priya cannot exercise a contractual right against a document that does not trigger it." "I know the legal reason." "Good. I am asking about the other reason." I turned the tablet face down. "The other reason is that I want to see what they do when they believe the room belongs to them." Mara did not smile. She had learned that my calm was not always peace. Sometimes it was the last stage before a decision became irreversible. "What are the rules?" she asked. "They receive the same courtesy as every other guest. No special upgrade, no punishment, no staff member trying to perform loyalty for me. If they need something, they use the front desk." "And if your father demands to see the owner?" "He can wait in line." Mara picked up the tablet. "I will brief the department heads." When she reached the door, I stopped her. "Mara!" She looked back. "Ask Priya to prepare everything we would need if Julian accepts the offer. Matching funds, notice language, closing sequence. I want no delay once the clock starts." "Understood." "And schedule the family event as if nothing unusual is happening." "That part may be difficult. It is not their first Christmas in a building they did not pay for." The sentence escaped before I could soften it. Mara's expression changed, but she did not correct me. She only nodded and left. I sat alone with the reservation confirmation. The name Adrian Mercer remained in the center of the screen. I had not heard his voice in years. I had heard it anyway, in memory, whenever a contract needed signing, or a supplier questioned my authority, or someone looked at me as if I had entered a room by mistake. He had always believed ownership was the same thing as belonging. In a few days he would learn that a guest could stand inside a room without having the right to decide what happened there. 12 years earlier, the Mercers gathered around a dining table that had been designed to make every conversation look important. The table was long, dark, and polished to a mirror. Adrian sat at its head with one hand around a wineglass and the other resting beside a stack of property reports. My mother sat to his right. Sloane sat near the Christmas tree, where the lights made her hair look deliberate. Ethan was halfway down the table, watching everyone except our father. I had brought my business plan in a blue folder. It contained 37 pages of research, a 5-year model, supplier estimates, a sustainability plan, and 3 different versions of the first property I wanted to build. I had spent 6 months making it impossible to dismiss without reading. Adrian did not open it. "You chose Christmas dinner for this?" he asked. "You are here. So are you. That does not make every subject appropriate." I placed the folder beside my plate. "I want to start a hospitality company." Sloane lowered her fork. My mother looked at me, then at Adrian, as if the order of those glances could prevent damage. "A hospitality company," Adrian repeated. "Small properties at first, sustainable operations, local employment, high-touch service. I have the operating model." He gave a short laugh. "You have a document." "I have worked in restaurants for 4 years." "You have served people drinks for 4 years." The room seemed to contract around the word served. I was 24, old enough to understand that he was not confused about my plan. He understood it well enough to know exactly where to place the insult. "You taught me that no work is beneath anyone," I said. "I taught you to understand your position." "My position is that I want to build something." "Your position is that you are my daughter. You do not need to invent an identity because you are bored with the one you were given." Sloane gave a nervous little laugh. "Dad, she is not saying she wants to abandon the family. She is saying she wants to compete with people who have spent their lives doing this." "I want to learn." "You want to play entrepreneur." I looked at my mother. "Would you let him speak to you this way if you were the one with the plan?" Her fingers tightened around her glass. "Claire, this is not helping." "It is helping me understand." Adrian leaned back. The light from the tree moved over his face in green and gold. "You have been indulged for too long. The company has given you a job, a home, an education, and every opportunity to find a sensible direction. Now you want to risk all of that for a lodge in the mountains. I am not asking you to finance me. You are asking for permission." "No, I am informing you." The silence that followed had a hard edge. Ethan looked up. For 1 second I thought he might say something. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Adrian set down his glass. "You have always mistaken defiance for independence. And you have always mistaken control for care." My mother whispered my name. The sentence was already between us. No one could put it back in my mouth. Adrian stood. He did not raise his voice. He never needed to. His authority lived in the quiet spaces after he spoke. "If you walk out of this house tonight, do not come back expecting us to repair the consequences of your choice." I looked at the blue folder. "You mean I should stay and apologize for having a plan?" "I mean you should learn what happens when you believe your own press." I pushed my chair back. My mother stood too. "Claire, wait until morning." Morning will not change what he said. "Make this easier." "For who?" She had no answer. She turned toward the tree and began adjusting an ornament that was already straight. I went upstairs, put clothes into a duffel bag, and slid the blue folder into my laptop case. I took the small amount of cash in my desk drawer and the old brass key my grandmother had given me when I was a child. When I came back down, Ethan was standing near the hallway. "Claire," he said. His voice held everything he would later call concern. "What?" "You could just stay tonight." "Would you ask him to apologize?" Ethan looked toward the dining room. That was the answer. I opened the front door. Snow blew across the porch and struck the warm hallway like a handful of thrown sand. Behind me, my mother said I could still make this easier. Adrian said nothing. I stepped outside. The door closed before I reached the driveway. At the bus station, I bought a ticket with the last cash in my wallet. The clerk gave me change in coins that felt too heavy. I sat beneath a flickering sign and opened my laptop. The blue folder was still there. I read the first page of the plan while snow dragged itself across the windows. At the top, under the working title, I had written one sentence: "Guests should feel expected, not screened." I did not know yet that the sentence would become a company, a property, and a boundary. I only knew that I had nowhere to sleep and that the first shift at a restaurant in Denver began at 6 in the morning. When the bus arrived, I carried the folder with me. The restaurant in Denver was called the Copper Finch, and its kitchen had the emotional atmosphere of a storm trapped indoors. I learned quickly, because mistakes were expensive, and nobody cared about my family name. A late delivery meant a menu change. A broken dishwasher meant washing plates by hand. A server in tears meant someone had to cover a section, while also finding out why she was crying. The work was physical, repetitive, and honest in a way the Mercer offices had never been. For 2 years, I worked every shift the manager offered. I learned how to read a room before the first complaint. I learned that a guest who says everything is fine may be preparing to leave. I learned that people remember the person who solves a small problem without making them explain why it matters. Julian Bell noticed that. He was in his 50s then, with gray at his temples and the habit of watching a room before deciding where to sit. He came to the Copperfinch twice a week and ordered the same soup, even when it was not on the menu. One night, a pipe burst under the bar. Water spread across the floor while the manager argued with a repair company on the phone. A wedding party had arrived early, a delivery truck was blocking the alley, and the dishwasher had decided to die in sympathy with everything else. I moved the wedding party to the back room, called a neighboring cafe for clean glassware, found a local plumber who owed our chef a favor, and put towels under the bar before anyone slipped. Julian watched from his table. After closing, he placed his empty bowl beside the check. "You know what you did wrong?" he asked. "Several things. You solved every problem yourself. That is generally better than solving none. It works at 24 tables. It fails at 200 rooms." I sat across from him. "You have been listening. I have been eating. Listening is free." He slid a business card across the table. "If you ever decide to build your own place, call me." I kept the card in my wallet for 6 months. When I finally called, Julian did not ask whether Adrian approved. He asked what the guest should feel when she entered the lobby. "Expected," I said. He nodded as if I had answered a financial question. "Then find a building that can make that possible." The building was an abandoned lodge outside Aspen. The roof leaned toward the valley. The plumbing had frozen in 3 places. Half the windows were boarded, and the former owner had left behind a cracked front desk and a stack of menus printed for a restaurant that had closed before I was born. I walked through the lobby with Julian while wind moved through the broken windows. "It is not much," he said. "It is a start. That is not the same thing. It can become one." He offered capital through a transparent structure. His investment vehicle would take a minority block in the Aspen property entity, with clear reporting rights and a contractual right for me to match any future transfer of that block. He told me to read every line before signing. "You are not doing me a favor," I said. "No. I am buying into a risk I understand." "And if it fails? Then we will know exactly how it failed." That was the first investment conversation I had ever had that did not end with someone telling me to be grateful. The first winter was brutal. The boiler failed during a week when the temperature stayed below 0. A storm closed the pass and left 12 travelers stranded near the property. We had 3 working fireplaces, too much soup, and a staff that had not yet learned to hide fear from one another. We brought people inside. We gave the children blankets from the linen closet. We let truckers sleep in the conference room. We boiled water on portable burners and served dinner by lantern when the power went out. Nobody asked who deserved a room. We asked who was cold. By morning, the storm had passed. An elderly man who had spent the night in a chair found me in the kitchen. "You made a place out of nothing," he said. "We had soup. That is not what I meant." The story traveled before we had money for advertising. People told one another about the lodge that stayed open when the mountain road closed. A travel writer came, then a regional magazine, then a group of investors who wanted to know whether the model could be repeated without becoming sterile. I called the property Northlight House because the original plan had always been about finding a visible point after a dark stretch. Growth came slowly enough to remain personal and quickly enough to remain frightening. We hired locally. We built systems around sustainability because the mountain was not a backdrop. It was the reason the property existed. We trained staff to solve problems without humiliating guests. We treated the front desk as a place where people arrived, not where they asked permission to be human. Mara joined after the second property opened. She was the only executive candidate who asked what happened when an employee made an expensive mistake. "We fixed the system," I told her. "And the person?" "We teach them how not to repeat it." She accepted the job the next morning. I stayed out of most press. Mara became the public face of Northlight because she was better at answering questions about expansion without letting strangers turn a business into a biography. Our holding company used a neutral name. The brand became recognizable. I did not. Adrian could have found me if he had looked. He never did. The blue folder stayed in a locked archive in my office. The pages were marked with revisions, crossed out costs, and notes written during the bus ride to Denver. The first principle remained underlined. Guests should feel expected, not screened. I had not yet learned, but a family could walk into a place built on that principle and still expect the owner to surrender the keys. By Wednesday, the family itinerary had grown to 14 pages. Mara and I reviewed it in the operations office while snow moved across the windows in thin, horizontal lines. The schedule included a welcome dinner, a private breakfast, a guided snowshoe route, a charity market, 2 unscheduled blocks labeled Family Time, and a ballroom rehearsal for the Christmas event. "Who added the private car service?" I asked. Adrian's assistant. "Remove it!" Mara looked up. "They paid for it." "Then they can use it from the standard transportation desk." "You are serious about the no special treatment rule." "If I make exceptions before they know who I am, I will spend the whole week deciding whether every exception is revenge." She crossed out the line. The rule mattered for another reason. Northlight was not a stage built for my emotional satisfaction. It was a functioning business with employees who had not chosen my history. If Adrian behaved badly, the staff would not be asked to absorb it for me. If he behaved well, they would not be asked to reward him on my behalf. At noon, Ethan called. His name appeared on my phone with no history beneath it, no old thread, no birthday message, no abandoned draft. Just a number I had never deleted and had never used. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello?" "Claire?" His voice was older than the one I remembered, quieter too. "Hi, Ethan." There was a pause long enough to show that neither of us knew what a brother was allowed to say after 12 years of silence. "I heard you are in Colorado." "I am." "Still working in hospitality?" "Something like that." He gave a short breath that might have been a laugh. "We are coming to Aspen for Christmas." "I know." "Right, the reservation." "The reservation?" "Dad wants the family together. He thinks it will be good for everyone." "Does he?" "He thinks it will look good for everyone." That was the first honest thing he had said. I looked through the glass wall toward the lobby. Mara was speaking with 2 department heads. A housekeeper wheeled a cart past a Christmas tree taller than most apartments. "Are you coming?" Ethan asked. "I will be there." He did not know what I meant. I could hear him trying to decide whether the answer was a threat. "Okay," he said, "then I will see you." Yes. The call ended. I kept the phone in my hand. I had imagined many versions of meeting my family again. In some, I said everything. In others, I said nothing and let the building speak. I had never imagined the first person to call would sound like someone asking permission to exist in the same conversation. Mara came in without knocking. "That was Ethan?" "Yes." "How did it go?" "He is coming." "That is not what I asked." "It is the only answer I have." She placed a folder on my desk. "Gideon's people have not requested a formal property review. They do not need one. No, they have a family booking." The folder contained an informal reconnaissance checklist disguised as a hospitality planning request. Arrival traffic, ballroom capacity, south access road, distance to the adjacent parcel, renovation restrictions, local labor costs. It was not a due diligence file. It was a man walking through a building while pretending to be impressed by the candles. "Adrian is doing the walk," Mara said. "Gideon wants observations, not reports. Sloane is handling the event schedule." "I know. She has an event branding consultancy now. Small, but she is good at staging a room." I looked at my sister's name on the planning sheet. Sloane had always understood the social surface of the Mercer family. She knew where to stand in photographs, which stories to repeat, and when to turn a disagreement into a joke before Adrian had to acknowledge it. And Ethan? No professional role connected to the event. He has been working in public sector community development in Denver, but his record is uneven. He always wanted to help people. Wanting is not the same as doing. Mara's eyes stayed on me. "You are worried they will use the visit to get information." "I am worried they will use the visit to prove they can still enter any room and decide what it means." "You can refuse the booking." "No." "Why?" I folded the reconnaissance sheet and returned it to the folder. "Because the property is not mine to close whenever my family becomes inconvenient. It belongs to the staff, the guests, the investors, and the community that made it possible. I can protect it without turning it into a private fortress." Mara's expression softened. "That sounds like the line from your old plan." "The line from my old plan is better written." "You still have it?" "In the archive." "You should let yourself throw one thing away." "I throw away plenty." "Not the things that can still hurt you." I did not answer. Adrian had chosen Northlight because it was a polished venue, and because Gideon wanted access to the flagship without alerting its owner. My family would arrive as guests. Gideon would receive information. Julian's fund would decide whether to entertain a sale. I would have to keep all 3 tracks moving without allowing any of them to determine what Northlight became. Outside, a snowplow turned at the edge of the drive. "Let them come," I said. Mara picked up the folder. "That is the plan?" "That is the plan." "And when they recognize you?" I looked at the empty lobby below. "They will recognize me when the room is ready to hear my name." Priya Nair did not use dramatic language when she explained a bad transaction. She used tabs. By Thursday afternoon, 3 colored tabs marked the pages spread across the small legal conference room. Julian's block, the buyer's terms, and the rights attached to the Aspen SPV. "Start with the part that is real," I said. Priya slid the first page toward me. "Julian Bell's investment vehicle owns a minority block in the Aspen flagship SPV. The block carries board access, information rights, and a blocking position on major property decisions. It does not give the buyer control of Northlight House Group. And Gideon wants it because the flagship is the only property with direct access to the South Valley corridor. If he acquires Julian's block and secures the corridor rights, he can pressure the board, obtain internal data, and propose a conversion plan for the adjacent parcel. A residential development. Luxury residences with a private club, a new access road, and fewer local operating restrictions." I looked at the parcel map. The proposed road ran across the slope below the lodge and would cut through the route used by our seasonal staff. He wants to turn the access road into a gate. He wants to turn the valley into an asset with controlled entry. That was Gideon's language, translated into something honest. The next tab contained the right of first refusal clause. When Julian's investment vehicle formally received and accepted a definitive offer for the block, it was required to serve notice on me. I would have 10 business days to match the offer terms. If I did, the transfer to Gideon could not close while my matching exercise remained in good standing. The clause did not freeze a company. It protected a specific transfer. The distinction mattered. Has Julian received the definitive offer? No. Gideon has sent a non-binding term sheet. The offer could change before it becomes a formal transaction. So the clock has not started? Correct. Can we exercise early? Priya gave me the look she reserved for questions that had already been answered by the agreement. No. You would be trying to match an offer that does not exist in contractual terms. It would be ineffective. Worse, it would reveal the structure and give Gideon time to rewrite the deal around the corridor. I nodded. That was the business reason for waiting. Not the family, not the staircase, not the expression I imagined on Adrian's face. The law had not offered me a move yet. Prepare the funds, I said. Prepare the exercise notice. The moment Julian serves notice, I want the response ready. Already in progress. Priya opened the third tab. Mercer Real Estate had signed a conditional development and financing commitment with Gideon's group. The commitment depended on Gideon acquiring the SPV block and securing the southern easement. Adrian's company controlled that easement through a neighboring parcel. So Gideon needs my father's access agreement. He needs the agreement, the financing bridge, and the public credibility your father's name gives the project. Does Adrian know the target is Northlight? The documents identify the holding structure and the Aspen SPV. They do not list the beneficial owner in the advisory packet. He has not seen my name. Not in the materials he has received. I thought of Adrian walking through the lobby with his family, observing the roofline and the guest flow, approving the work as if it had appeared without an architect. Gideon is using him. Most acquisition groups use every available relationship. That is a polite way to say it. Priya closed the folder. We can disclose ownership now and make the family visit irrelevant. No. Claire, the legal clock has not begun. Premature disclosure weakens the business position. Let Julian's side decide whether to accept the formal offer. Let the agreement do what it was designed to do. Priya studied me. And the family? They are a separate matter. They are arriving at the same property during the same week. That is a circumstance, not a legal strategy. She nodded, satisfied that I understood the difference. Mara was less satisfied when I explained it to her. We were walking through the lobby after the meeting. Staff were hanging paper lanterns above the reception desk. The scent of pine had begun to settle into the wood. You are waiting for a document, she said. I am waiting for a valid trigger. And if the document arrives after the family? Then I will handle it after the family. What if Gideon uses the informal visit to find a weakness? Then we show him a property without giving him restricted information. What if Adrian demands access? He can demand it. You are separating the business from the hurt. I am trying. Mara walked backward for a few steps, watching me. Tessa Quinn confirmed the interview. Tessa was a journalist who had written about community-centered businesses without reducing them to inspirational slogans. She wanted a business profile, local hiring, sustainable construction, the decision to keep the flagship independent. After the reunion, I said, she agreed. Business questions only. She agreed to start there. That is not the same thing. It is the best promise a journalist will make. I looked toward the staircase. The family would stand below it in a few days. I would have one chance to decide whether the first thing they learned was my history or my authority. The contract would tell me when to act against Gideon. My boundary would tell me when to speak to Adrian. For once, I wanted both decisions to belong to me. By Friday morning, the family package had become a small operational universe. There were dietary notes, arrival preferences, room temperature requests, transportation windows, photographer instructions, and a handwritten note from Sloane asking for white flowers in the ballroom because the family palette is winter neutral. I moved the note to the bottom of the folder. "What is wrong with white flowers?" Mara asked. "Nothing. The phrase family palette makes me want to charge a consulting fee." "I will add it to the invoice." We reviewed the floor plan. The 6 suites occupied the north wing, far enough from the main lobby to preserve privacy, but close enough to make the family feel surrounded by the property. The ballroom opened onto a terrace. The front desk had clear sightlines to every guest route. "Repeat the rule," I said. Mara did not need to look at her notes. "The Mercers receive the same courtesy as every other guest. No employee punishes them, flatters them, or rescues them for you." "Good. I have briefed the department heads." "And the front desk?" "They know Adrian may ask to see the owner. They should tell him the owner is available by appointment." "Which you will not accept?" "Not during the arrival event." Mara made a note. An hour later, Adrian's assistant called to request a private property tour. He wanted to inspect the south access road before the family dinner. I declined and offered the standard guest itinerary, which included a guided history walk led by the guest experience team. The assistant's pause lasted 4 seconds. "Mr. Mercer is accustomed to private access. Northlight offers private access when it is included in a reservation or approved for a business purpose." "This is a business purpose." "Then his company can submit a business request through the proper channel." "He is the client." "He is a guest." I heard the silence sharpen. "I will relay that," the assistant said. "Thank you." When I put down the phone, Mara was watching me. That was almost enjoyable. It was a scheduling decision. Of course. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ethan. I opened the message. "Are you angry that we are coming?" I typed 3 answers and deleted them. The honest one was too long. The cruel one was too easy. The polite one would have been a lie. Finally, I wrote, "Anger is not the same as access." He replied almost immediately, "I know." I did not know whether he meant he understood the distinction or whether he was admitting that he had never earned either. Downstairs, one of the junior managers stopped me near the concierge desk. "Ms. Mercer, the family is listed under Mercer Real Estate. Should we use the company billing contact or the personal names at check-in?" "Personal names, standard verification." "Even for the principal?" "Especially for the principal." The manager nodded and walked away. That was how a boundary became real. Not in a speech. In a line on a check-in form, a request routed through the front desk, a staff member protected from the obligation to guess which powerful guest deserved an exception. Mara leaned against the concierge counter. "You know, some people would have canceled the reservation and called it healing. Some people do not have 200 employees depending on their decisions." "That is not the only reason." I looked at the staircase. "No." The truth was that I wanted to see my father's face when he understood the scale of the life he had never bothered to ask about. I wanted him to look at the staff and realize they trusted me without being ordered to. I wanted to stand in the room he had once told me I could not survive outside and let the room remain mine. Wanting that did not make me cruel. It made me honest about the part of myself I had spent 12 years polishing into silence. The storm forecast moved closer. The family would arrive the following afternoon. In the archive, the blue folder waited beneath a row of signed operating plans. In the legal office, Priya's response packet waited for a definitive offer. In the north wing, 6 suites were being prepared for guests who believed they were returning to a family story. I stood beneath the lobby lights and watched Mara direct the staff. Northlight did not bend around my history. It continued. That was the first victory I could trust. The Mercers arrived beneath a sky the color of unpolished silver. Their cars came in a loose procession, black tires cutting through the thin layer of snow that had settled on the drive. The first vehicle carried Adrian and Elise. Sloane followed in a smaller SUV with 2 garment bags hanging behind the front seats. Ethan came last, alone, with a canvas duffel on the passenger side and the expression of a man who had agreed to attend a family event before deciding what he thought about it. I watched from the service corridor, not because I was hiding, but because the lobby belonged to the arriving guests. Mara had asked whether I wanted to stand beside her at the door. I had said no. "You are the owner," she said. "Exactly. I should not be the first person they see." She gave me the look that meant she understood and disagreed. The Northlight welcome team moved with practiced ease. Coats were taken, luggage tags were checked. Children from another family leaned against the fireplace, arguing over a chess piece. A server carried a tray of hot cider past the desk. No one bowed. No one announced the Mercers as if a title had entered the room. Adrian noticed the distinction immediately. He paused just inside the entrance, scanning the lobby as though the building had been designed to reveal its owner if he looked hard enough. He saw the reclaimed beams, the local stone, the copper lamps, and the handwritten note beside the fireplace explaining that the wood had come from a dismantled mining office. He saw the staff. He did not see me. "Mr. Mercer," the front desk manager said, "welcome to Northlight Aspen. May I confirm the reservation under Mercer Real Estate?" Adrian's jaw tightened at the word reservation. He had expected recognition, perhaps a private greeting from someone who had been warned about his importance. Instead, the manager asked for identification. Elise touched his sleeve. "Adrian." He handed over his license. Behind him, Sloane whispered, "This place is beautiful." Ethan did not answer. He was staring at the environmental statement mounted behind the desk. It described Northlight's water system, energy use, employment commitments, and local purchasing policy in plain language. There was no founder portrait, no family name, no photograph of me. The front desk manager found the booking. 6 suites for 5 nights. The ballroom is reserved for your private dinners and the family event. Your itinerary is in the welcome envelopes. "We were told there would be a host," Adrian said. "Your host for the stay is Mara Ortiz, our chief operating officer. I will call her now." He looked past the manager toward the staircase. "And the owner?" The manager did not blink. "The owner is on site." That answer was both true and useless to him. Mara emerged from the corridor with a clipboard in one hand. "Welcome, I'm Mara. We have arranged your rooms in the north wing so the family can use the sitting area between them. Dinner is at 7. The weather may affect tomorrow's trail activity, so we have prepared an indoor alternative." Adrian studied her face. "You work for Northlight?" he asked. "I run the property." "And the owner is comfortable with the family booking being handled this way?" Mara's smile remained professional. "The booking has been handled according to the same process we use for every private group." Elise glanced at the welcome envelopes. "That sounds efficient." "It is," Mara said. "Efficiency is one of the more generous forms of hospitality." Sloane laughed before she could stop herself. Adrian looked at her. She lowered her eyes, embarrassed by the sound. I returned to the office before anyone could ask me to come down. The reveal had been scheduled for the first evening, after the family had settled and before dinner. I had considered delaying it. I had considered letting them spend 24 hours guessing. Both choices would have turned the truth into a performance. At 5:30, Mara knocked on my door. "They are in the ballroom," she said. Adrian has asked twice whether the owner will join dinner. Did you tell him? I told him the owner would welcome them personally. Good. She looked at the blue folder on my desk. I had taken it from the archive and placed it beside the guest manifest. Do you want to carry that? No. Why not? Because I don't need to prove that I was the girl who made it. The ballroom had been arranged for a casual welcome. Small tables stood near the windows. A fire burned in the stone hearth. The Mercer family had been given champagne, but I asked the server to bring me tea. Adrian turned when I entered. For 1 second, his expression held only irritation. Then recognition arrived, followed by something less manageable. Elise's hand went to her mouth. Sloane stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. Ethan remained seated, but his shoulders changed as if he had been carrying a weight in the wrong position. "Claire," Elise said. I walked to the center of the room. "Welcome to Northlight Aspen." Adrian stared at me. "You work here." "I own Northlight House Group. This property is held by the Northlight Aspen SPV. I control the voting position." The sentence was intentionally precise. It gave him no dramatic phrase to twist into a family story. Sloane looked around the room. "This is yours?" "Yes." "You built all of this?" "With a team. Julian Bell provided early capital through his investment vehicle. Mara built the operating structure with me. Priya keeps us from making expensive legal mistakes. The staff built the experience you will actually remember." Adrian's eyes moved to the windows. "Why was this hidden?" "It was not hidden. It was private. From your family. From people who had not asked." No one spoke. I let the silence stay ordinary. It was not a courtroom. It was not a revenge scene. It was a room full of adults who had just received information they should have learned years earlier. "You are guests," I continued. "That means you will receive the same service standards as every other group. It also means you will not receive confidential operating information, private staff records, or access to restricted areas because we are related." Adrian's face hardened. "I'm not asking for special treatment." "Your assistant asked for a private operating tour before lunch." "I asked a question." "And I gave you the answer." Elise stepped between the temperature of his anger and the rest of the room. "Perhaps we should sit." I nodded toward the tables. "Dinner will be served in an hour. Until then, please use the lounge or the spa level. Sloane, the snow conditions have changed the trail plan. Mara will show you the indoor program." Sloane looked at me as if she wanted to say something personal. Instead, she nodded. Ethan finally stood. "Claire?" His voice held no demand. That made it harder to answer. "Not now," I said quietly. He accepted it. Adrian remained by the window. Behind him, the mountain disappeared into the storm. "You should have told us," he said. "You should have asked." The sentence landed without volume. It did not need any. I left the ballroom and walked back toward the office. On the way, I passed the front desk. The manager was explaining the dining schedule to a guest from Seattle. He glanced up, saw me, and returned to the conversation. The building did not pause for the Mercer's discovery. That was what I wanted them to understand. Northlight was not a secret room I had built to surprise them. It was a living business that had existed while they were telling themselves I had disappeared. Adrian asked to meet me before breakfast. He chose the library because the library had a door. That was the first thing I noticed. He wanted a private conversation, but he also wanted the architecture to suggest that privacy belonged to him by default. I brought Priya. He looked at her, then at me. "This is a family matter." "It became a business matter when your company booked a property under its corporate name, when Gideon Shaw sent a term sheet for an interest in the Aspen SPV, and when your development company's land position became part of the proposed conversion plan." You have been investigating us. I have been reading documents addressed to my company. Priya placed a folder on the table. We should be clear about the current status. The document Mr. Shaw sent last week is a non-binding term sheet. It does not trigger Claire's right of first refusal. Adrian leaned back. I know what a term sheet is. Then you know why Claire has not exercised a right that has not yet been activated. His eyes narrowed. The block is small. It is a minority block, Priya said. It is not controlling ownership. It carries board access, information rights, and a blocking position on certain reserved matters. The distinction is commercially important. Not to Gideon. It is exactly why he wants it. I opened the second folder. And why he wants your corridor. Adrian's expression did not change, but his hand stopped moving. The North Valley corridor was not owned by Northlight. Mercer Real Estate controlled the critical access and utility easement. The company had also issued a conditional development financing commitment tied to a future conversion plan. Gideon's model assumed he could acquire Julian's block, secure the corridor, and turn the sustainable flagship into the anchor for a luxury residential development with a private club, expanded road access, and a different land use profile. He told me the corridor was a supporting asset, Adrian said. Your signature appears on the commitment. That does not mean I agreed to a demolition plan. It means you agreed to a development structure that makes the existing operating model impossible. Priya turned a page. The signed offer has not yet been served on Julian's investment vehicle, but we expect that to happen today. Once Julian formally serves Claire the signed offer and its definitive terms, the 10-business-day contractual ROFR period begins. Claire can match the offer through the required notice process. She cannot validly exercise the right against a non-binding outline. Adrian looked directly at me. You could have matched it already. No, I could have transferred money to Julian and created a dispute about whether a valid notice existed. That would be reckless. It would also show Gideon which terms mattered before he was obligated to keep them. Priya nodded. If the offer is restructured before notice, the matching terms may change. Claire's preparation is ready. The legal clock begins only when the contract says it begins. Adrian's voice grew quieter. You planned this. I prepared for a foreseeable transaction. You planned to take Julian's block away from him. I plan to preserve Northlight's operating future. Julian is free to sell. I am free to match a definitive offer if the agreement gives me that right. Those are separate choices. He stood and walked to the shelves. You built a business out of the same things this family gave you: money, education, access, a name people recognized. I built it after this family told me I was not capable of building anything. That is not what happened. It is what happened to me. He turned. You are making a wound into a balance sheet. You are making entitlements sound like a family investment. Priya did not move. She had learned that the most dangerous part of a meeting was often the sentence everyone wanted to interrupt. Adrian pointed at the folder. If you match Gideon, you still need the corridor. We need lawful access. We do not need your preferred development plan. That easement is not a favor. I never asked for a favor. Then you understand that I can withdraw the conditional commitment. You can. He seemed disappointed that the threat had not produced a negotiation. And if you do, I continued, Gideon's plan becomes less attractive. Not impossible. We have other financing options. The corridor remains a separate legal matter. Your choice will affect your company, Gideon's plan, and the family's reputation. It will not change the terms of my ROFR. His face flickered at the word reputation. It was not shame, it was calculation. You think you can separate yourself from us, he said. I think a contract can be separated from a childhood. Priya closed the folder. We will send a formal response after the notice is served. Until then, No one from Northlight will discuss confidential terms with Gideon or Mercer Real Estate outside counsel to counsel channels. Adrian looked at her. You speak for Claire now? I speak for the company when the company needs counsel. And what does Claire speak for? I picked up my tea. The part of my life you did not manage. We left him in the library. At 8:42, Julian's investment vehicle sent the notice. At 8:47, Priya confirmed that the signed offer from Gideon's vehicle had been attached in full. At 9:10, the 10-business-day clock was recorded in the transaction calendar. The offer included the price, the closing conditions, the board rights schedule, the information package, and Gideon's requirement that the corridor and financing commitment remain available through closing. I read every page twice. The offer was aggressive, but not irrational. Gideon was not buying control. He was buying a position from which he could slow decisions, demand information, influence the board, and force a future sale when the property was under pressure. The corridor made the block more valuable because it made his conversion plan possible. Without the corridor, he would own a minority interest in a functioning hospitality company whose central strategy he could not dictate. That was his real motive. Not the resort, not the family. The ability to make patience expensive for everyone else. Can we match? Mara asked from the doorway. We can. Can we afford it? We can afford the purchase price. The question is what we refuse to sacrifice to do it. Priya entered with the funding schedule. No emergency sale of the community fund, no staff cuts, no debt secured against the North Wing. Those were your instructions. Keep them. Mara looked toward the ballroom, where the family was gathering for breakfast. They are going to think this is about them. It is not. Adrian will make it about them. Then we will keep making decisions about the business. I signed the internal authorization for the matching funds. Priya prepared the notice. The clock was now real, visible, and indifferent to anyone's feelings. For 12 years, I had believed the most powerful thing my father could do was reject me. I had been wrong. The more powerful thing was to let him choose his own position after the rejection no longer controlled mine. The first dinner was supposed to be informal. Mara had arranged it in the smaller dining room, where the tables were close enough for conversation, but far enough apart that no one could mistake the event for a ceremony. The menu used ingredients from 3 local farms. Sloane asked whether the trout was sourced nearby. Ethan read the printed note about the maple syrup. Elise complimented the room. Adrian said very little. He had spent the afternoon on calls. I knew because his assistant had requested a private conference room twice, and because the front desk had routed the requests according to the same rule as every other guest. The conversations were probably with Gideon, the Mercer board, or outside counsel. Maybe all 3. When the first course arrived, Sloane raised her glass. To Claire, she said. Adrian looked at her. She did not lower the glass. I mean it. This is extraordinary. You did not know she owned it, he said. Neither did you. Elise drew a slow breath. Sloane, no, Mom. We are all being polite because we think politeness can protect us from the fact that we were wrong. Ethan set down his fork. Sloane looked at me. I repeated what Dad said, that Claire had run away because she was dramatic, that she had tried a business idea, failed, and decided everyone else was responsible. I said it at school. I said it to friends. I said it so often I stopped knowing whether I believed it. Adrian's face went still. You were a child, Elise said. I was 22 when I said it at the fundraiser. No one corrected her. The server placed the next plate in front of me. The timing was so precise that for a moment I was grateful for the interruption. I don't need an apology performed over trout, I said. Sloane's eyes filled. I know. I just wanted to say the accurate thing while I still had the courage. Ethan looked at his hands. I wanted to contact you. Adrian turned to him. You did not. No. You could have. I know. The admission had no defense attached to it. Ethan kept going. After Claire left, I wrote 3 emails. I never sent them. I called once from a number she would not recognize and hung up. When I went to college, I told myself she wanted distance. When I eventually saw her name in an industry article, I still did not understand what she had built. I thought contacting her would make it look like I wanted something. You did want something, Adrian said. You wanted your sister back. I wanted to be less afraid of you. The room changed. Adrian looked toward the windows. Beyond the glass, snow crossed the dark in diagonal lines. Elise placed both hands around her water glass. We should have told you to stay. I looked at her. You told me the house was not a place for arguments. I was trying to stop your father from saying more. You were trying to stop me from making the room uncomfortable. She lowered her head. Adrian pushed back his chair. This is absurd. It is uncomfortable, I said. That is not the same thing. We came here to spend time together. Then spend it honestly. He stood. The room seemed to wait for him to leave, but he did not. His anger had nowhere to go that did not make him look like the person Sloane had just described. You want everyone to believe you were abandoned, he said. I want everyone to stop calling the abandonment a business decision. He looked at Ethan. You are going to sit here and let her rewrite the family? Ethan met his eyes. She is not rewriting it. She is describing the part we left out. Adrian's chair remained behind him, untouched. I did not ask him to sit. Elise did not smooth the moment. Sloane did not apologize for speaking. For the first time since we arrived at the table, no one in the room was working to restore Adrian's comfort. He noticed. I need air, he said. The door closed behind him. Elise waited until his footsteps faded. I am sorry. For which part? She looked at me with the exhausted honesty of someone who had run out of explanations. For making peace more important than truth. That was closer to an apology than anything she had offered before. Sloane wiped her eyes. Did you really sleep in a storm shelter? The first winter. Why? The lodge had no functioning heat in the east wing. The shelter had a stove. And you still opened? We opened 3 months late. Ethan gave a small, incredulous laugh. You built a company from that? We built a company from knowing what a building needed before we invited people inside. No one said that line sounded like a lesson. It did. But it was also the simplest explanation for Northlight. After dinner, Ethan found me near the indoor garden. I am not asking for a position, he said. Good. I know how that sounds. It sounds like you understand timing. He looked at the herb beds. I have been doing community development work in the valley. Small housing projects, local vendor networks, workforce programs. I wanted to tell you years ago. Why did you not? Because Dad would have called it an attempt to use your company. Because I thought you would hear his voice when I spoke. I hear many voices. I decide which ones matter. He nodded. I would like to show you what I have built. Not tonight. Not as a brother asking to be forgiven. Send it through the same channel as anyone else. I will. That was the first request he made that did not ask me to suspend a boundary. In the corridor outside, Adrian stood within earshot. He had returned from the terrace and heard enough to understand that the family was beginning to exist without his narration. He looked at me. I looked back. Neither of us spoke. The next morning, Gideon sent a message to Julian's counsel disputing the value of the corridor. It was a small move, but it confirmed the pressure point. The plan depended on Adrian's access more than Gideon had admitted. The family had practiced saying that I was difficult. At dinner they had practiced saying what they had actually seen. The second version was less convenient. It was also harder to control. Tessa arrived at 10 with a recorder, 2 cameras, and a producer who had read every public filing Northlight had made in the last 5 years. She did not arrive looking for a family story. That mattered to me. Her interview request had been submitted through the usual press channel. The request concerned the Aspen flagship, local employment, and the company's approach to sustainable hospitality. The family reunion was mentioned only in the event schedule, not as a proposed topic. Mara met her in the lobby. I joined them after the staff briefing. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to confirm the boundaries. We can discuss Northlight's operating model, the property, the acquisition of the Aspen minority block if you rely on public or approved transaction information, and our local commitments. We will not discuss family history." Tessa nodded. "That matches my questions." "Your producer submitted a note about the family being here?" "The note came from the Mercer public relations team," she said. "It described this as the first family Christmas in 12 years. I assumed it was context for the event, not a request for a personal interview." Mara looked at me. The wording had been deliberate. Adrian's team had submitted the reunion as a human interest angle without asking whether I wanted to become the angle. "Then we are aligned," I said. The cameras were set beside the fireplace. Tessa asked about the first operating winter, and I described the storm shelter, the water system, and the decision to keep the lodge smaller than the original investor model recommended. "Why smaller?" she asked. "Because growth is not automatically value. A property can increase revenue while reducing the reason guests came." "What is the reason guests come here?" "To feel that the place has room for them without pretending that the land is empty." She asked about local hiring. Mara joined that answer. She described the training program, the wage floor, and the way Northlight had funded transportation for employees during the winter road closures. Tessa asked about the minority stake held by Julian Bell's investment vehicle. I said, "Julian provided early capital and remains a minority partner in the Aspen SPV. The company's voting control and operating strategy remain with Northlight." "There has been reporting about a potential offer from Gideon Shaw. There is a contractual process underway. We do not comment on non-public terms." "Could the offer change Northlight's direction?" "Only if the owners and board approve a change. Northlight is not a passive asset. Its value depends on the operating model." Tessa did not ask whether my father had made an offer. She did not ask whether I had returned to my family. She did not ask if the resort was revenge. The interview lasted 40 minutes. When it ended, Tessa shook my hand. "You are careful." "I am responsible for what other people repeat." "That is different from being secretive." "It is." She packed her recorder. "For what it is worth, the story is strong without the reunion." "Thank you. I mean that professionally." I understood. Adrian was waiting near the side entrance. His assistant stood behind him, holding a phone with the PR draft open. "You made the family look invisible," he said. "The interview was about Northlight." "You knew what Tessa would ask." "Yes." "You could have mentioned us." "Why?" "Because we are here." Being present at a property does not make someone part of its operating history. His assistant looked down at the phone. Adrian took it from her. "The PR team gave her the family angle." "Then the PR team gave her a choice. She chose the business." "You are enjoying this." "I am relieved." "There is a difference?" "Enjoyment would require me to want you diminished. Relief requires only that I stop being assigned responsibility for your image." His phone rang. He glanced at the screen. "Gideon." Adrian answered. "What?" He listened. The call lasted less than a minute. When it ended, his face had changed. "Gideon says the easement can be replaced," he said, though he seemed to be speaking to himself. "Can it?" "He says there are other routes." "Then he should use one." "He also says the financing commitment is not essential." "Then withdrawing it should not concern him." Adrian looked toward the valley. He only needed us to make the plan look certain. It was the first time he used the word us without including the family. He meant Mercer Real Estate. You signed the commitment, I said. I signed it because the project was presented as a partnership. Gideon presented it as a purchase. He presented the purchase as inevitable. Inevitable is a word people use when they want you to stop asking who benefits. He looked at me sharply, but there was less anger in the look now, more recognition. You think I did not ask enough questions? I think you asked the questions that protected the family name and not the questions that protected the business. For a moment, I saw the father who had taught me to read a contract before signing it. Then I saw the man who had not read the plan I carried out into the snow. The article will run tomorrow, Tessa said from behind us. She had returned for her coat and heard the last sentence. It will be factual. Adrian's attention shifted to her. Will it mention that we are here? If it matters to the property story. It matters to my family. Tessa considered him. That is not the same standard. She left before he could answer. That evening, Mara brought me the first edit of the piece. The headline was about the flagship's local model. The opening paragraph described a company that had grown without losing its limits. The final section quoted me on the difference between a full house and a successful house. There was one sentence about the Mercer family staying at the property. It said only that the owner's relatives were among the private guests attending a seasonal gathering. No one had been humiliated. No one had been made central. Adrian read the article alone in the lounge. When he finished, he folded the pages and placed them beside his untouched coffee. He did not ask me to change it. That was not an apology. It was a small surrender of control. Small things could matter when they were repeated. The gala was held on the third night because the weather made the original schedule impossible. The ballroom had been transformed without losing its shape. The tables used local linen. The floral arrangements were built from winter branches and dried seed heads. A quartet from Denver played near the fireplace. The event raised funds for a regional workforce housing initiative, and every sponsor had been listed on the program according to contribution, not social rank. The Mercer family sat at my table because I had placed them there. That decision surprised Mara. You do not have to put them near you, she said. I know. You can seat them with the other guests. That would make the table a punishment. And this is a choice. Adrian wore a dark suit without a company pin. Elise had chosen a simple blue dress. Sloane kept looking at the stage. Ethan had spent the afternoon with the community partners and was now speaking with a housing coordinator he had brought into one of his own projects. The family appeared in the program's host note. The wording had been submitted by Adrian's PR team. The Mercer family gathers at Northlight Aspen for the first time in 12 years. I had left the sentence unchanged. It was factual. The event host welcomed the guests and spoke about the housing initiative. Tessa's article had been published that morning and was already circulating among the sponsors. Several people congratulated me on the operating model. One asked about expansion. I said we were studying one additional property but had not committed. Adrian listened to every answer. At the midpoint, the host announced the Community Partnership Award. Northlight received it for maintaining employment and training through the regional wildfire season. Mara nudged me toward the stage. Say 3 sentences, she whispered. That is not how awards work. It is how you work. The host handed me the microphone. I looked at the audience, then at the table where my family sat. I could have made the speech about survival. Everyone in the room understood the shape of the story by then. I could have said that the girl who left the house had built a place the house would never own. The sentence would have received applause. I did not say it. Northlight is often described as a company built around hospitality, I began. That is true, but incomplete. Hospitality is not the performance of warmth. It is the discipline of making room without surrendering the standards that make the room safe. The audience grew quiet. This award belongs to the people who kept the property open during the wildfire season, to the local partners who told us when our plans were impractical, and to the employees who made a promise to guests while carrying private difficulties of their own. It also belongs to Julian Bell, who invested when the numbers were unflattering, to Mara Ortiz, who turned a fragile operation into a durable one, and to Priya Nair, who taught us that a boundary can be a form of care. I paused. Some of you know that my family is staying with us this week. I am grateful they came. I am also grateful that Northlight does not depend on my family history to remain standing. Both things can be true. Adrian looked down. The work is to learn what to do with that truth, I said. Thank you for supporting the people who live and work in this valley. The applause began near the back of the room. It moved forward gradually, not as a wave, but as a decision made by individuals. I handed the microphone back. The host did not ask me a personal question. She did not turn the event into a reunion interview. She thanked me for the remarks and introduced the next speaker. That was important. The truth had been mine to offer, not hers to extract. When I returned to the table, Elise touched my hand. Thank you, she said. For what? For not pretending we were not here. I did not pretend. You also did not use us as evidence against him. I looked at Adrian. He is not the only person who needs to hear the truth. Adrian's throat moved. He picked up his water glass, then set it down. The rest of the evening continued. The quartet played. The housing initiative raised more money than expected. Sloane danced with a local architect, and Ethan argued with a contractor about a transit route. For 30 minutes, the table behaved like a table. After the final auction item, Adrian stood. He did not ask for the microphone. He lifted his glass. I want to say something, he said. The people nearest us turned. The room did not become silent, but attention moved toward him. He looked at me. Claire built this place without my help. I did not understand that because I did not ask enough questions. I have spent several days learning that the two things are not the same as saying I was unaware. His voice shook once and steadied. I am proud of what she built. I am also responsible for the fact that I did not make it easier for her to build it. No one applauded immediately. That was kind. Adrian raised his glass. To Northlight. I lifted mine. To accurate records. Sloane laughed softly. Ethan did too. Elise's eyes filled. The room resumed its noise. Later, in the empty corridor, Adrian said, You made that difficult. You made the first 12 years difficult. I meant the speech. It was not a speech about you. That is what made it difficult. I understood then that he was not asking for forgiveness. He was acknowledging that he had not been able to force himself into the center of the story. Tomorrow morning, I said, we need to discuss the Mercer commitment. I know. Bring your counsel. I will. He walked away, then stopped at the turn. Claire? I waited. The line about making room. Did you write that before you knew we were coming? Yes. He nodded as if that answer cost him something and continued down the corridor. The speech had not changed the transaction. It had changed what the transaction would mean when we sat across from each other in the morning. Adrian arrived at the office with Mercer Real Estate's general counsel and no assistant. Elise was not with him. Neither were Sloane or Ethan. The meeting was scheduled for business, and for once, the family understood the distinction without being told. Priya sat beside me, Mara joined by video from the operations office. Gideon's counsel was not present. Adrian placed a document on the table. This is the withdrawal of Mercer Real Estate's conditional development financing commitment for the proposed conversion structure, he said. It also confirms that Mercer will not exercise or transfer the corridor easement in a manner intended to force a change in Northlight's operating model. Priya read the first page. The non-interference language is limited to the current Northlight Aspen operating plan. Correct. It does not prevent Mercer from negotiating ordinary access arrangements. Correct. It does not waive any existing rights. Correct. I looked at him. You want us to know what this is. It is a business document. Good. His counsel glanced at him, perhaps surprised that he had used my word. Adrian continued. Gideon's offer was based on the assumption that Mercer would support the conversion. Without that support, the offer is still legally possible, but its economics are materially different. And you are withdrawing because you no longer support the conversion. I am withdrawing because I did not understand what I was being asked to support. That is not the same answer. He took a breath. Both are true. Priya turned to the final page. This needs to be signed before any public statement. We will not announce a family resolution. Agreed. And the company will not represent this as a gift to Northlight. Agreed. And your lawyers will not contact Julian's vehicle to interfere with the ROFR process. Adrian looked at his counsel. Agreed. I did not feel victorious. Adrian's signature did not return the 12 years or turn a withdrawal into a clean moral act. It was a decision made after leverage was exposed. That was enough for the business. You should understand, I said, that Northlight is still matching Julian's sale. Your withdrawal does not decide the ROFR. I know. If we close, the Aspen SPV will remain under the same voting structure. I know. If we do not close, the transaction will fail on its own terms. I know. He looked tired. You keep making sure I know what I do not control. That is because you keep arriving with documents that assume you do. His counsel almost smiled. Adrian did not. He signed first. I signed second. Priya witnessed the execution and sent the withdrawal through counsel. The process took 19 minutes. After his counsel left, Priya placed the ROFR packet before me. The offer was live, the clock open, and the funds cleared. I signed the exact match notice. She transmitted it at 4:18. Julian's counsel acknowledged receipt 5 minutes later. The block would close under ordinary conditions. I had chosen on the record. After the lawyers left, Adrian remained seated. I thought the family had given you a foundation, he said. You gave me a childhood. I built the foundation later. Do you hear how harsh that is? Yes. Do you mean it? Yes, he nodded. I used to think harshness was the same as strength. A lot of people do. It made the company successful. It made the company efficient. Those are not always the same. He looked at the document between us. What happens now? We finish the family stay. The article remains factual. The transaction follows its contract. If we work together in the future, it will be through ordinary channels. No family exception. No family exception. No private access. No private access. No one will be told I saved Northlight. No one can save what you did not build. He flinched. I regretted the sentence as soon as it landed, but I did not retract it. A boundary was not improved by pretending it had never been spoken. Fair. Could, he said. That afternoon, Elise asked to meet me in the garden. She did not bring flowers, a letter, or an explanation. I am sorry, she said. I know. You do not have to accept it. I do not know what accepting it would require. Nothing. It can simply be true that I am sorry. I looked at the winter herbs under the glass. That is a useful beginning. I was afraid of your father. I knew. I was also afraid of losing the version of the family that made my life feel stable. I knew that too. She swallowed. I told myself I was protecting everyone. I was protecting my place. There was nothing I could give her that would make the confession comfortable, so I gave her the only thing I could give without lying. Thank you for saying it accurately. She cried then, quietly, without asking me to hold her. That was the first apology I could stand beside. The family meal was held on the final night. I made 3 rules: no business, no press, and no surprise speeches. Adrian objected to the 3rd rule. I have already used my speech, he said. Then you have nothing to worry about. Sloane brought a deck of cards. Ethan brought a list of local restaurants he wanted to visit during his next trip. Elise asked Mara how the staff handled the wildfire season. Adrian listened more than he spoke. The meal was not reconciliation. It was a meal. That distinction made it possible to finish. On the morning they left, Adrian returned his key at the desk. The manager thanked him for staying. I was told the owner handles departures, he said. The owner is available through the regular channel, the manager replied. Adrian looked toward the office hallway, then handed over the key. He did not ask to see me. For the first time, that felt like respect instead of distance. 3 weeks after the Mercers left, Ethan sent a formal proposal through Northlight's general submissions address. Sloane submitted her materials separately. Neither mentioned the family. Ethan's proposal concerned a community partnership program for a second Northlight market. He had identified local suppliers, workforce housing constraints, transportation gaps, and a group of small operators who could support a seasonal property without being absorbed by it. Sloane's proposal concerned guest experience and event programming. She had spent the winter reviewing Northlight's public materials, interviewing former event clients, and mapping where a larger property might lose the intimacy that made Aspen successful. Mara read both packets before showing them to me. They are good, she said. That is not the same as ready. No. What did you tell them? Nothing yet. I asked Priya to join the review. She arrived with a yellow pad and the expression she wore when someone had brought her a beautiful idea with hidden obligations. The family issue is irrelevant, she said after reading the proposals. The business issue is that both applicants are connected to you. That creates a governance risk. They know. Knowing is not a mitigation. We designed the structure before we answered them. The program would run for 12 months through an independent subsidiary. Ethan and Sloane would receive defined scopes, fixed compensation, and the right to earn an ownership interest only against measurable milestones. They would contribute their own capital to approved expenses. Northlight would provide a limited development budget, not an open-ended family account. There would be quarterly reporting by an outside accountant. All vendor relationships would be disclosed. No Mercer real estate money, personnel, land, or easement would be involved. Their roles could be ended for performance, conduct, or conflict reasons. Completion of the pilot would not guarantee a permanent position or equity. Mara added one final condition. They report to the same operating committee as every other project lead, she said. Not to Claire. Agreed. I sent the offer through Northlight's normal hiring and venture channel. Ethan called first. You really made us apply, he said. You really applied? I thought you might give me a conversation. I gave you a process. He laughed. That is more like you. Do you accept the conditions? I accept the conditions. I do not accept the idea that family history is irrelevant. It is relevant to how carefully we structure the work. That is what I meant. Sloane called an hour later. The 12-month term is reasonable, she said. The no guaranteed equity clause is painful. Then the proposal should be strong enough to earn the next conversation. You sound like Dad. That is not a compliment. It was not intended as one. I smiled despite myself. I accept, she said. But I want the evaluation criteria written before we start. I do not want to discover at month 11 that the standard was invisible. Send Priya your requested revisions. You will not negotiate with me? I will negotiate with you through the same channel I would use for anyone else. That is almost comforting. It should be. The pilot began in March. Ethan mapped community partnerships for a second property in a smaller mountain town. He did not promise that Northlight would arrive. He spent the first 2 months proving that the town's infrastructure could support the kind of operation he wanted to propose. Sloan built a guest experience study that challenged one of Northlight's assumptions. Aspen guests wanted intimacy, but they also wanted shared programming that did not require a private booking. She designed a calendar of public workshops, rotating local dinners, and low-impact events with attendance limits. Their work was not easy to watch. Ethan was impatient with the committee's reporting requirements. Sloan hated being told that an idea was not yet supported by data. They argued with each other in meetings and then returned with better versions of their proposals. Adrian sent one email during the first quarter. He did not ask for access to the pilot. He asked whether a Mercer real estate representative could review the independent subsidiary's land assumptions. I forwarded the request to Priya. Priya replied with one sentence. No, unless Mercer is retained as an external consultant under ordinary terms. I sent that answer to Adrian. He replied, understood. No complaint, no family argument, no request for an exception. The absence of drama was its own kind of evidence. At the 6-month review, Ethan's plan had reduced projected margins but improved the feasibility of local hiring. Sloan's program had produced fewer high-spend bookings but a stronger return rate among guests who attended community events. The committee approved both to continue. You look surprised, Mara told me afterward. I am pleased. That is not what I said. I am also surprised. They are not your children. I know. You keep looking at them as if they are a test of whether the family can be repaired. I considered that. They are a test of whether people can change when the reward is not forgiveness. Mara nodded. Better. At month 11, the pilot reached its final milestone. Ethan secured letters of intent from local partners without promising Northlight ownership. Sloan's public programming model met the attendance and community revenue targets while keeping the event cap intact. They had not earned permanent equity. They had earned the right to negotiate it. That distinction was written into the original agreement. When I told them the pilot was complete, Ethan looked relieved. Sloan looked ready for another argument. The next agreement will be harder, I said. Why? Sloan asked. Because now you know what the work costs. Ethan smiled. And you know what we can do. I know what you did. Sloan gathered the evaluation packet. That is the most encouraging thing you have said. It was not encouragement. It was a record, but records, when they were accurate, could become a form of trust. 15 months after the Mercer family arrived at Northlight, after the pilot had completed its first full cycle, the first snow came early. The North Valley corridor remained undeveloped. Gideon had lost the development leverage that made Julian's minority block strategically valuable after Mercer withdrew its conditional financing and committed access support. While the signed offer was still live, I had validly exercised the ROFR. The matching funds had closed, and Julian's investment vehicle had transferred the block to the Northlight structure under the agreed documents. The transfer did not give me a new identity. It gave the company a cleaner ownership position. Julian remained an advisor by contract for the transition period. Priya updated the board records. Mara revised the risk plan. The staff learned that the deal was over because the breakfast briefing lasted 12 minutes instead of 40. Northlight continued. The independent pilot also continued, in a different form. Ethan accepted a negotiated operating role with defined authority over community partnerships. Sloan accepted a role leading guest experience for the next property review. They received compensation and ownership options tied to future performance, not to the family tree. Their reporting lines were written into the agreement. If they failed, the roles could be revoked. If they succeeded, the success would belong to their work. Adrian did not participate. He had arranged ordinary access for Mercer Real Estate's existing easement obligations and had signed a separate vendor agreement for a maintenance project. The work was handled by Priya and Mercer's counsel. I did not sit in on the negotiation. He did not ask me to. When he came to Northlight that winter, he came as a guest. The front desk manager greeted him by name, confirmed his reservation, and asked whether he wanted help with his luggage. Adrian said yes. He waited in the lobby while the staff completed the check-in. I saw him from the staircase. He saw me, too. Neither of us moved immediately. Then he walked over. "Claire, Adrian, I have a reservation." "I know. Your manager was very clear. She is good at her job. She told me the owner was available through the regular channel." "The owner is available." He glanced toward the desk. "I am not asking for an exception." "Good. I am asking whether you will have dinner with me." The invitation was personal. It did not contain a request for access, a business document, or a hidden audience. I considered it. "No surprise speeches," I said. "Agreed. No business." "Agreed. And if the conversation becomes a demand, I leave." "Agreed." We ate at the small table near the garden. Elise joined us later. Sloane and Ethan were in town for the pilot review and came in after their meeting. The evening was not easy, but it was not staged. At one point, Adrian asked Sloane about the public event model. She explained the attendance cap. He asked what happened if a sponsor wanted more seats. "We say no," she replied. He looked at me. "That is one of the family traditions," I said. Sloane smiled. Ethan raised his glass. "To saying no before the numbers make it necessary," he said. The toast was not about the past, but the past remained present in the phrasing. Adrian looked at his glass. "I used to think no was a challenge." "Sometimes it is," Ethan said, "and sometimes it is a boundary," Elise added. Adrian nodded slowly. "I am learning the difference." I watched the snow gather on the windowsill. A year earlier, he had stood in the ballroom and learned that I owned the building. Now he was learning that ownership was not the only thing that could change the way a room worked. After dinner, he asked if he could see the lobby. "It is not restricted," I said. "I know." We walked there together. The fire was low. A family from Chicago was playing cards near the window. The front desk manager was helping a guest arrange a shuttle. Adrian studied the room. "When you first showed me the plan," he said, "what did you want me to say?" I could have answered that question in many ways. I could have said I wanted approval. I could have said I wanted him to recognize me. I could have said I wanted him to apologize before I left. The true answer was smaller. "I wanted you to read it," I said. He closed his eyes briefly. "I should have." "Yes. I cannot change that. No. I can read what you send me now. If it is sent through the right channel." He almost smiled. "Always the channel. Channels are how people know what kind of conversation they are entering." He looked at the door to the office corridor. "You still keep the blue folder?" "In the archive." "Do you ever read it?" "Sometimes." "Does it embarrass you?" "It reminds me that I was right about some things and wrong about others." "Which things were you wrong about?" I looked at the guests in the lobby. "I thought building a place people could enter would make leaving easier." "Did it?" "No." "What made it easier?" "Learning that a door can stay open without giving everyone the right to walk through it." He absorbed that in silence. The next morning, Adrian checked out at the desk. He paid the bill through the same account used for the reservation. He left a note for the staff and no note for me. I found out later that the staff note said, "Thank you for the clear rules." Mara pinned it beside the operations board. At the end of the season, Northlight approved the next property review. Ethan and Sloane presented their work to the committee. Their roles were evaluated against the same standards as every other lead. They argued over the schedule, revised the budget, and left the room with assignments for the next quarter. No one called it a family business. It was a business where family members had earned a place. That difference protected everyone. On the first night of the new winter, I stood at the lobby entrance after closing. The lights reflected against the snow. The front doors were locked for the night, but the glass still showed the warmth inside. Mara came beside me. "You are going to keep standing here until the storm ends?" she asked. "Probably." "The storm is not asking permission." "Neither am I." She handed me the final ownership report. The Aspen SPV was clean. The ROFR transfer was complete. The pilot had moved into its earned phase. The Mercer relationship had been reduced to contracts that could be read by anyone with the authority to request them. The blue folder remained in the archive. The house where I had been told to leave remained somewhere behind me, smaller than the memory of it. Northlight stood ahead, not as proof that I had defeated my family, but as proof that their version of me had never been the whole record. I opened the lobby door for a late guest. "Welcome," I said. The guest stepped inside, shaking snow from a coat. The door closed behind us. The building stayed warm, and the place remained mine.